Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Property Podcast. It's episode 303, and this week we are starting with a bang. Well, actually, probably embarrassment, because we are going to review our predictions from 2018. We're not letting ourselves off the hook. We are going to review our predictions of 2018. Uh-oh.
Yes, welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday morning property investors come together to be informed and inspired. This is our most nervy episode of the year, where we see how our predictions from a year ago faced contact with reality. This year is particularly nerve-wracking because last year, I think it's fair to say, we absolutely smashed it. Our predictions last year were spot on. So this year, we can only really lose. How far can we fall? Well, we're about to find out.
So let's not mess around. Let's get straight into it. Now, I noticed in the show notes you've kindly put me first, so thank you for that. Let's listen to one of my predictions from the beginning of the year. I'm going to say that Liverpool will be in the top 3 cities for capital growth next year.
Well, as they say, Rob, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Manchester and Birmingham both in the top 3, so you got 2 of those, and Liverpool only just outside, so a qualified pass maybe?
Yeah, it's okay. I might be allowed through to the next stage. Not a complete embarrassment. It was a big, bold claim to try and pick the top 3 exactly, so getting 2 of the 3 isn't so bad. So after being quite specific on cities and how they would do, Rob, next up we both looked at how the UK market would behave as a whole.
Really, I'm just saying that I think growth is probably going to be less than 3% and inflation's probably going to be a little bit more.
A little bit more bandwidth here. I'm going to say UK growth will be less than 5%. In total. Congratulations, Rob. While we were both right, you were a lot closer on this one. So both passes, both done really well, but you got a distinction.
Yes, I gave myself a little bit less wiggle room with my 3%, but got away with it. According to the Nationwide Index, which is what we normally use when we're making these, annual house price growth to November was 1.9%. So there's a chance that there was a huge rally that we didn't notice and it'll end up being more than 3, but that looks very unlikely. So a tick in that particular box.
And Rob, at the time of recording this, inflation stands at 2.2%. And your prediction on inflation being a little bit more was bang on. It was just a little bit more. So very well done there. Shiny medal for you. So let's see if your run continues, Rob, because you wanted to have a little bash at London again.
All I'm going to say is that I think London is going to be outperformed by every other region of England. So I'm excluding Scotland and Wales, but I'm just saying that London is going to perform more poorly than every other region of England. Well, finally, because I spent years saying how London was going to do poorly and that it just kept doing better and better. I was still convinced that my reasoning was right, even if the timing was wrong. So finally, like a stopped clock, my prediction on London has turned out to be correct. It has indeed grown slower than any other region of England in 2018. It has in fact fallen. Prices in London are down 0.2%. That's again according to Nationwide, and that's up to the end of Q3, which is the latest data we've got. That's to the end of Q3, which is the latest data we've got at the time of recording. But again, it seems unlikely that's going to change towards the end of the year. So that's property prices. But you also had a prediction, Rob, specifically about lending against those properties.
I think the trend of lenders, mainstream lenders, entering the limited company market will continue. We've currently got 1 as we record this. I would expect at least 4 big name lenders to be in the market by the end of 2018. Oh dear, hashtag fail. This didn't happen. So I expected some of the big boys to come into this market, and it just didn't happen. The market definitely heated up, and there's a lot more activity there, but the big players coming in hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't, but the thought process was definitely right, and you're not alone with that one, because I've very much thought they would as well. No more major lenders, but more lenders. There are now 22 lenders who will lend to limited companies, and the number of products is up massively. According to an article in Property Wire, there were 263 products available this time last year, and there are now 628. So the number of products has more than doubled. So good news for limited companies, a lot more choice in terms of lending. And we're not doing more predictions right now, but it does seem likely that the big boys will follow. Lenders this year have been trying to reach new segments of the market and relaxing criteria to entice people who they weren't particularly interested in before in the personal market, because that market is reducing. So that's where they've been focusing in 2018. It seems inevitable, though, that more lenders will follow the money next year.
But luckily, Rob, because you are a good friend, you didn't want me to feel left out, and you got one wrong yourself.
And I'm going to reiterate my prediction from last year, because it went well, and say that there's going to be no base rate rise this year. Yeah, well, misery loves company, and I'm sure it makes you feel a little bit better to know that this was a huge fail as well. I said no base rate rise. Very hard to dress this one up and try to pretend it was a win, because there very much was a rise in the base rate. Just the one, and it was unexpected when it did happen, but none of that matters. Still a fail. Now, because we did so well the previous year, we started showboating a bit towards the end of our predictions, going beyond property and talking about Bitcoin and the stock market as well. So to start with, let's hear what we said about Bitcoin.
At some point next year, in 2018, Bitcoin will crash by at least 40%.
Well, Rob, when you made this prediction, it's important to remember that this was highly contrarian. It's easy to forget looking back what things were like, but you made this prediction at what in retrospect was the height of the mania, although a lot of people would have shouted you down for saying so at the time. You predicted 40% within the year. In fact, by February, the price had more than halved. So you didn't just get this right, you got this massively right. You underplayed it, if anything.
Yes, this one may have seemed a bit bold at the time, but actually it wasn't that scared of making this prediction because it was a mania market. It was absolutely bonkers. This, for me, had to happen. I know people personally who stayed in, even after my prediction, and that cost them a lot of money, unfortunately. But I think the big lesson from this is this wasn't any incredible insight from myself. This is just knowing the history of economics on a very simplistic level and just seeing that things repeat itself over and over again. And this is just one of those cases where it was always going to happen. Bit lucky with the timing that I picked it right at the height of the market. But for me, it may have seemed bold at the time, but I was quite comfortable making the prediction.
Yeah, well done for that one. From $17,000 at around the time you're making that prediction to $3,600 on the day that we are recording this today. If you think property didn't have a great year, that's a bit of a shocker. And just to round things off, Rob, you also had a prediction about the performance of the stock market.
We will see a stock market correction in the US and UK. Now, when I say correction, nowhere near the level of falls of Bitcoin, in double digits, but nowhere near 40%. But I do feel, looking at market cycles, we are due a correction. Yeah, for me, both the US and UK markets were due a correction, and that happened again very early on in the year, not long after the prediction was made. So the definition of a correction is 10% or more, and that's exactly what played out. So, again, may have seemed very accurate and very bold, but actually, when you look at it from a macro level, didn't seem that crazy to predict it. It just felt like it was going to happen. Very much like we do with property, the trends and cycles, once you've got comfortable with how they work, then become reasonably easy to predict, certainly if you base it on the long term. But very lucky that both of those predictions happened right after I made them.
So a terrible year for Bitcoin, not great year for the stock market, finished lower than it was at the start of the year, and not a vintage year for property either. London property down absolutely, and the whole market fractionally down in real terms. So 2018, not a great year for most asset classes, but not a bad year, Rob, for our predictions. Not quite at our 2017 peak, but we didn't embarrass ourselves either.
Yeah, so let's have another go at trying to embarrass ourselves, Rob. Next week, we'll be back doing more predictions. And while it may not have been a stellar year for property in 2018, if you had followed our predictions of Manchester, Birmingham and Liverpool, you actually would have done very well. All of them north of 6% growth. So while the UK didn't do very well, there are pockets of the UK that are performing strongly. So next week, we'll be giving you our 2019 predictions of where those hotspots are going to be.
So that's how it went for us. What did you make of 2018? Let us know on the socials. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Property Hub UK. And if you want to get 2019 off to the best possible start, then come along to our Discovery webinar. If you haven't been to one before, then you can find out what we get up to away from the podcast and how we might be able to help you. It's completely free, of course, and you can register at thepropertyhub.net/discover. For now, though, we'll see you next week with more predictions. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.